Hello, everyone, and welcome to the new episode of the Wellness Connections podcast. Today we are chatting with Rebecca Corvin. She has a brand Ladybek, and she just wrote a book, and I'm super excited to dive in and talk a little bit about wellness and different aspects that we might not always think about. So welcome. How are you doing today?
Hey, I'm excited. I'm excited to be here and excited to see you and to spend some time with you. It's been too
Same.
long.
It
So this
really
will be
has
a
been.
very organic conversation because we have a lot of catching up to do.
Yes, and I love that. And uh I love talking to people and it being super organic. So it
Yeah,
works.
perfect.
Um so tell me a little bit about yourself. We talk a lot about wellness, so if you want to share any pieces of your wellness journey, how you got started, how you got to now, whatever you want to share.
Okay, like open, just
Yep.
like,
Open, go for
all
it.
right. I feel like it really has to start with when I became a mom for the first time. And that's usually like it was like my gateway to realizing that I wasn't living a healthy life. I always say that my like seriously, I feel like I've learned, so much from them and so much through my pregnancy, my becoming a mother, and then in my postpartum,
Mhm.
kind of journey. So, I guess to keep it brief, whenever I got pregnant, which was like 10 years ago now, like where's like at the time my son just turned 9. This is
I
like
feel you.
insane. I just started doing some it's nuts. I started doing some like research and I just remember going to my doctors and I saw 6 different OBs, um, like one for every month, basically, because I was 6 months pregnant and I had seen 6 different OBs, did not feel confident with any one of them. I had all of these questions. I had seen the documentary, The Business of Being Born, which was
Hmm.
it's not as popular today, but it's still great.
Yeah.
Started learning about Ina May Gaskin and midwifery, and all of these things. So it was like the rabbit hole. It was the gateway. And so I started questioning everything. I was like,
Hmm.
oh my gosh, and that's a whole other podcast episode in itself. But that
Right.
that was definitely the thing that kind of like led me down the rabbit hole. Um, and I just started having this more curious perspective or attitude, towards everything that the world was telling me to do. It's like birth is one of the most common things that happens to a woman. Like, why
Hmm.
are we treating it this way? Why are we treating it like it's a disease? Why can I not wear my own clothes? Or, why are you telling me that I have to be hooked up to all of these things when I have a perfectly healthy pregnancy, and no presenting, symptoms, right? Like I could go
Right.
on, but um, when I had my son, I had my daughter, which by the way, I ended up having them both at home. So that was the choice that we made that was best for us. Again, 10 years ago.
Hmm.
And that led us into things like chiropractic care and more more natural alternatives, I guess. Even something as simple as like I haven't purchased like dryer sheets or tampons in 10
Right.
years.
Yeah.
It's just
Hmm.
like
Right.
things that I now like take for granted. I use wool balls and menstrual cups, and that might
Right.
be TMI for the people who are listening and like ready to talk about the book. But hey, this is a wellness podcast.
That's right.
And I am an open book and I feel like people need to know these things. So I think though, like that pregnancy, that mama bear instinct was like, oh no, we're not going to settle for what these people are just telling us. Like, Becca, you're smarter than this. You can ask questions, you can advocate for yourself, you can find people who can support you. You can learn from people who have been doing this for much longer than you. Um, and I ended up, really just kind of like making my way through all kinds of things. And I think whenever you find whatever that gateway thing is for you, then it does spill over everywhere else.
Oh,
Because
yeah.
then, I started getting into like talk therapy and somatic therapy. And, around that time is probably when you and I met. I was
Mm-hmm.
doing things like bringing women together for these intimate village meetings, as Emily and maybe some of you listening know. And you and I actually met at a retreat.
Yeah.
Did you know the date? Did you say 2018 or
It was
19?
2019.
Oh
It
my
was right
gosh.
before I launched my first business, which was the Wellness Directory that I've since closed, and
Okay.
the
Yes.
Wellness for Generations. Yeah, and it was that I want to say it was March or April, and it was in Uniontown.
Yeah. Well,
And
and I
yeah,
remember you
yeah,
calling me about the
hmm
directory, and then I was just like, "Hey, I'm having this event." Like,
yeah. And I was like, I don't really have the money to do that. And you're like, okay. And then like 2 weeks later, you're like, would you like to help with the event? Because I kind of need a little bit of support and just like
yeah.
making sure everyone's. And I was like, sure, that sounds great.
Yes. Oh, it's like so crazy. So hopefully I answered your question.
Yeah.
When I start talking about birth, I can talk about it
Oh,
for
I
4 weeks
feel you.
straight. So
We will have to do like a birth episode sometime because I totally get that. So yeah, let's shift gears a little bit and talk
yeah.
about so that was kind of like the start, the catalyst. And I think that that is a catalyst for a lot of people. I think I had started my journey a little bit before motherhood, but then motherhood really shifted a lot more for me. Like I was like already into oils and was like, I'm gonna be an oily mom and like all this stuff. And then I had my son and your senses are so heightened. And then I was like, oh, wait a second. We're not just putting these straight oils on. We're gonna learn a little bit more. And that's when
Mhm.
I started doing dilution and learning more about safe usage with oils and stuff. So
Mhm.
yeah, motherhood is a whole thing. And I liked your comment about like you're smart. Like we have this innate
Mhm.
intelligence within us. We can tap into, is this right? Is this wrong? Like
Mhm.
there are those subtle energies that we can feel. Is this a good thing
Mhm.
or a bad thing? And advocating and asking questions, because
Mhm.
if you don't know the answer, there are people that do, that are
Mhm.
on a good path. So being able to tap into that is really really good. So all right, so share with, you became a mom, you were into so you did the village, you did some different things. Fast forward to
Mhm.
to now. What led you to like this point with writing a book and deciding to do all of that fun stuff?
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, like a lot of things have obviously happened. The next biggest milestone, I guess I would say, after having my children, who were born in 2015 and 2017, would then be 2020,
Mhm.
where in February 2020, my ex-husband left, and March 2020, the effects of the pandemic hit our area. So I
Mhm.
was like suddenly having to, and I don't want to minimize everything that happened in between my children being born and 2020, because there was still a lot.
Yeah.
And to kind of sum that up, I would say I was affected a lot by postpartum anxiety and depression. And I say that because I'm a huge advocate for it and people don't
Mhm.
talk about it. I don't believe in the baby blues. I think that's insulting. I think it's insulting to mothers. I think it's like medical gaslighting. I think it's
Mhm.
toxic positivity. I don't think it's just like okay to tell a new mom who's experiencing some like massive hormonal shifts and dark thoughts and physical symptoms of intense and debilitating anxiety and depression that she just has the baby blues.
Mhm.
Um, it's unfair, and it makes her believe that she doesn't need help and support when she does. And I
Yeah.
feel like my follow-up statement is the support and help that I'm referring to is not always a prescription. And that also doesn't mean that I'm anti-medication. So I just
Yeah.
feel like I have to cover all of
No,
my
yeah.
ground there.
Mhm.
But I had a lot of that going on, but was also a very high functioning mom. I was married at the time. I was working full time. I had my own business. And then, once I decided to leave my full time job, that was kind of around the time that we started the village. And I started to kind of like pull people together and explore this like passion project of mine, which is really to what I ended up titling the book, is to help people really rediscover who they are.
Mhm.
Because through those like moments of feeling very lost myself, I was just like, my kids love me no matter what. Like they don't care, excuse me, they don't care what kind of like car I have. They don't care how much money I'm making. They don't care if I went to college or, they like kids just don't
Mhm.
care. They come
Right.
out loving you. And it was the most like unconditional love, and still is, that I've ever experienced. And I made a commitment to myself to find out like more about who I am. If these children could love me so much, then I had an obligation to uncover all of these parts of me that I knew were dormant and I knew
Mhm.
were traumatized and I knew weren't healed, So I went down this journey, and again, a lot of that, Emily, personally, because you were
Mhm.
there for it. Um, and that might be for another conversation too. But I wind up in 2020 facing this separation and divorce, and then the pandemic, which was a huge adjustment for literally everybody. And that's where I start the book. The book is, in the introduction of the book, it's me laying in the bathtub, which was like the only thing that I had energy to do
Mhm.
um, when I was trying to like reassemble my life and make sense of like what in the world happened.
Mhm.
And that was over 4 years ago now.
Yeah.
So since then, contrary to popular belief of some people maybe thinking that I've had it all together and my divorce was really easy and being a single mom is like goals and all this other stuff. It's been incredibly difficult, and God has been refining me every single moment. And that takes a lot of fire. That takes a lot
Mhm.
of heat. It takes a lot of pain. It takes a lot of letting go. And I'm grateful for all of it. Um, and last year, and depending on how detailed we want to get, but last year I went to an event and met a group of people who specialize in editing and publishing, like supporting authors and publishing this type of book, and like prayed about it and got the go ahead, got the green light from God, and was like, "Hey, let's do this." And so last June, it would have been like May, June 2023, I signed a contract with a team who could really help me make this happen, and wrote solidly, for almost a year. And the pre-sale date, I don't know when this will, hit your podcast, but the pre-sale date is in August. So, here in a few days, and then it'll publish in September 2024. So
Sweet.
that's the long and short of it, I guess.
I love that. Um, so many pieces there. What was the one that just came? I don't remember. That
I know I gave you a
my
lot.
brain. It was when I like stopped writing notes because I was like, oh, I'm like really engaged. Which I'm engaged when I'm writing notes, but I write them for a reason, so I don't forget.
Yeah, no, I
Um,
do the same thing.
but I'll go back to the postpartum depression. You had mentioned that, and I
Yeah,
think that as a society, we do let moms down. I mean,
yeah,
I've had three kids, also home births, because I
represent.
had to add, I know, right? Had to advocate because like I was not okay with the way that I would be
Yeah.
handled at a hospital. So did three home births. I struggled with very mild postpartum depression during my first, and my second was a lot deeper because I was not wanting any more kids after my first. And now this third one has been interesting because
Hmm.
there's been time. My oldest is 9 too. And so like having a baby when your oldest is 9 is like,
Mm-hmm.
where did this time go? So
Mm-hmm.
while there have been very hard moments and I do still struggle, and I struggled a lot more the earlier months, I'm really starting to now like want to do better and
Mm-hmm.
want to give Colton, my youngest, like a better life and like not feel resentment towards him and like all of that kind of stuff, which I did a lot
Mm-hmm.
with my second. And I think that that stems too from a society of like we aren't together. And that's I think why so many were drawn to the village and loved the village meetings because it was a community. You felt like you weren't alone and all of
Mhm,
that. And being able to build that kind of thing, like I'd love to see more of that all over,
mhm, mhm,
because we need each other. That's the way that we were created. We were created as connection, relational beings.
mhm.
And oh yes, the gonna shift then. I figured it
Yeah,
out what it was. Um, you had said, contrary to popular belief, your life isn't perfect. I
yeah.
think that there's such a balance there because I think you've done well at keeping your private life private.
Mhm,
Like you have chosen to show good parts and you also haven't let those hard parts define you in
mhm,
my representation, like in the outside
mhm,
world looking in.
mhm,
Because, I did know some of the things, but not a lot because I
mhm,
had my own stuff going on, so I kind of disconnected from a lot of people. And
mhm,
I think that that's something that even plays into some of that postpartum.
mhm.
We think that everyone's life is better than ours and they're doing great because we're watching it on social media. We don't,
Yeah,
unless you're making those real true connections, you don't know what somebody's going through. You don't know how they're handling things. You don't know what trials they're going through.
right.
Um, so I think that that is a really big key in that piece.
Mhm,
Um, and it's nice not having everyone up in your business too. But it does, it gives that idea of like people then just like they put you on a pedestal. They
mhm.
put a lot of people on pedestals. I mean, back when I was doing real good with health and wellness stuff, um, I had people that were afraid to go out to eat with me because they didn't want to order. And I was like, why? Like, I'm getting a buffalo chicken wrap. Like,
Yeah,
I'm
yeah,
not perfect. I don't eat, I post a lot
yeah.
of really positive content. I post a lot of stuff around like living healthy and all of that, but that doesn't mean that I'm doing all of that. I'm
That's
also a
funny.
human. Like I also
Yeah,
have like I like ice cream and I like, and
yeah,
it's fascinating to observe that piece of that. So
yeah.
anyway,
That is so funny.
so
I get it
so
though.
yeah. So tell me a little bit about your book. The journey that you went on writing it, the feelings you've had
Yeah.
with publishing and all of that.
Yeah. So, I mean, I know that I've wanted to write a book for a very long time. Um, I know there's many books in me. This is
Oh
definitely
yeah.
not the last one. So I think what was so interesting was like coming to the realization that like it it could feel complete, but like not done, if that makes
Mhm.
sense, which is why it's so great. I already have all of this like companion material to go with it because there's just so much I didn't get to say, or like so many ways that I could still elaborate
Mm.
on the book. But my biggest message, and this is a text copy, so it has the line across from it, but the title is Rediscover Yourself, Redefine Your Life. The subtitle is Creating Confidence and Finding Fulfillment, a guide to creating confidence and finding fulfillment. And those things just like really do, I think, tell the reader exactly what to expect. Um, I've been in this like personal development space for years, and there's a lot of I don't want to be negative, or it's not like I'm speaking to any one particular person or teacher in general, but there's a lot of uh there's a lot out there. There's a
Mhm.
lot to choose from, and there's a lot of people promising a lot of things, and there's a lot of people very happy to take a lot of money and to from people and like not deliver.
Mhm.
And I really didn't want to like I wanted to be careful to not put myself in that boat. I wanted to tell my story. I wanted to be very authentic. Um I wanted to provide practical tools for people. I feel like that's like what I'm known for, is just like being very practical, being very real. Like I'm
Mhm.
going to tell you when I'm like crying on the floor in the living room and eating like an entire thing of cheesecake by myself, because like that's real life.
Exactly.
Like
Mhm.
it's just real life. And it's okay, it's okay.
Mhm.
So what I decided, there were so many ways that we could have taken the book, and it's definitely not like a memoir by any means. My story is woven throughout it and other people's stories that they've shared with me, but it's a guidebook. So I really wanted people to be able to read a story, see themselves in it, realize like, wow, I'm not alone. Like
Mm-hmm.
I have felt this thing before, but then also give you something that can help you do something about that.
Right.
Because that's like a really big gap that I have always felt. I mean, I've traveled the country. I've worked with all kinds of different mentors and teachers. I've done all kinds of webinars. And if you're listening to this podcast, you probably have too, because you're that personal development like junkie. It's like we
Mm-hmm.
can't get enough of it. Um, but sometimes, we absorb. And I talk about this in the book. I call it the self-help spiral. We just like
Mm-hmm.
stay in the mode where we absorb information and we never actually do anything. So everyone always knows the answers. We always like know what we should do, but we don't know how to do it. So I didn't want to leave readers paralyzed, like partway
Mm-hmm.
through the book and be like, wow, and Emily, I learned this through village meetings and through all these women's retreats I've had. Like with the women's retreats, people would come, they would learn all kinds of stuff, get super hyped up. Then they'd go out into the world feeling amazing. And 3 days later, I'm getting phone calls like, man, I feel like garbage. I came down off of that high. What do I do now? And that's kind of how those village meetings that they were our like sustenance. They were the things that in between the events,
Mm-hmm.
at one point, and you might remember this, we went from having them monthly to biweekly. And there
Mm-hmm.
was a point we were having them every Thursday night, I think it was like every Monday and then sometimes Thursday nights. Because we needed that, just like
Mm-hmm.
how I am with this church that I found that I'm like so grateful to have found this finally, to find a church that I feel the same way about. It's like going and getting that fuel, in
Yeah.
between those
Yeah.
bigger things. I wanted people to have a resource that they could read, feel inspired, and motivated, but also ready to like change their life.
Mm-hmm.
And be happy. This isn't a book that's like, oh, you're going to make 6 figures. Oh, I'm going to help you be an entrepreneur. Oh, I'm going to have like in an instant, your life is just going to change. I want you to build sustainable behaviors because that's what's real. Like this
Mm-hmm.
overnight success stuff. I mean, look, I've had people tell me it takes like 10 years for that overnight success, or whatever. Um, but I don't want to fool anybody. Like this stuff is, it takes discipline, it takes time, change takes time. It's not impossible. But it's not all, some of it's overnight, but it's not all overnight.
Yeah.
You have to stay with it. You have to keep believing. You have to surround yourself with people who support you. There's a lot, but there's plenty of it. So hopefully that's kind of like a nice overview,
Yeah.
but ultimately I'm writing to the people who feel like lost, who feel like they're in between phases of their life. Like maybe you're like happy where you are, but you're like ready for like the next part, or maybe you just left a job or a relationship. Maybe you're a mom for the first or second time and you're like, what do I do? Like, how do I
Mm-hmm.
rediscover who I am? Um, that's the intent, is like we just need to keep learning about who we are, even
Mm-hmm.
as our life changes and our situations change.
Yeah. I definitely agree with that. And um I my goodness, my brain keeps stopping. Um um like you had said about, having that low after a big high and that
Hmm.
sustainability. Like that is something that that self development, self improvement spiral is so an obsession is so accurate. And even in like health and wellness, like going after the new supplement, going after the, it is such a cycle that then keeps you like stuck essentially because you have to act like you said you have to actually take the steps then. And
Hmm.
I have definitely finally been seeing that shift in my own life because the last 6 months I've been working with someone on my business and I'm starting to see some of those results. And then 3 months ago I closed my physical location and like I was like, all right, it's time to go all in. Like it's time to stop like acting like I'm know what I'm doing, which I do, but actually doing it, like taking the action steps. And since I have, I have been changing a lot more in my health. I've been changing my motherhood. My marriage has like shifted. Like I don't even know. Like I don't know. It's just amazing to see those pieces, but it hasn't happened overnight.
Mhm.
Like I'm looking back because like this week has been a week of reflection, and I've been just looking at like different things that have shifted. I've been
Mhm.
noticing a lot more things and being more aware, and I'm like, wow, like 6 months ago, this would not have been a possibility.
Yeah, that's
6 months
great.
ago, I would have responded this way and not
Mhm.
this way. And
Mhm.
but it's been that consistent effort. So now that I'm finally starting to see that, I'm like, okay, I'm ready to be more disciplined in other areas because I can
Mhm.
see the value of it.
Mhm.
And yeah, I love that you share that, and that's in your book because it is a big key. It is a very big key. So
Yeah, and when you do that, you just become more efficient. Like a lot of this that I've taken is like business principle and applying it to your life. Like a business, if you're running an effective business, you're not going to be like hemorrhaging money on stuff that like you don't need. Yet we do it with our time and we do it with our energy because we are emotional beings and we feel some sort of obligation to people, or we made this commitment years ago, or we told ourselves, an older version of ourselves, that we were going to do something, and we're way too attached.
mhm.
We're way too attached. And I think we're going to get there in this conversation, but I also think that at least in my experience, the closer that I get to God and the closer that the more that I prioritize my faith, which really started with that like major wake up call when I had my children, and then again during my divorce in 2020. you know you realize how insignificant a lot of this stuff is, and just like what really matters. But my hope for readers is that it doesn't take like this big transformational moment for you to realize that. You should create that for yourself.
Mhm.
Create those moments for yourself and realize, like, man, I am spending a lot of time doing things that I don't enjoy, with people who aren't good for me, in places that I don't even like. My body doesn't even need to be here. I don't need to be anywhere near this building. Um, but then you have to be willing to face the consequences of that, which
Mhm.
in my experience was just like a lot of ridiculous I'm going to use the word harassment. I don't mean like, I'm not being extra, but it's just like harassment from
Yeah.
people. Well, where are
Mhm.
you at? Why aren't
Mhm.
you coming around? Why don't you come out anymore? Why, and I'm done explaining myself to people.
Right.
I'm not obligated to tell anybody why I don't go to a bar anymore.
Mhm.
If you want to have a conversation about my choice to not drink alcohol and respect it, I'm happy to do that.
Yeah.
I'm not obligated to tell you why I'm choosing to go to church every Sunday morning, every
Mhm.
Sunday that I'm able, right?
Yeah.
But if you want to have an open conversation with me about the church and maybe come with me, but I'm not going to debate anymore. I'm not going to justify myself anymore. I'm not going to explain myself anymore, because that's an energy leak.
Mhm.
And the more that we do that, the less energy we have to do the things we actually enjoy. And anybody listening right now, just like look at yesterday. You probably spent a ton of your energy either mentally justifying or verbally justifying and explaining the actions for, the reasons for your actions. And just imagine
Mhm.
how free you would be if you didn't have to do that. If you
Yeah.
were just like, I'm going to make a decision and I'm going to do that thing. And
Mhm.
then I'm going to make this decision and I'm going to do this thing. And you don't have to consider, I don't want to sound insensitive, because obviously I have people to consider in my life still,
Right.
but I don't consider everybody like I used to,
Mhm. I
like we don't have to.
right. No, I totally agree, and I think that when we start, I have realized on a lot of my own journey, uh, the last couple months, I have gone a lot more, and it's Colton. Like Colton was not planned at
Mhm.
all, but he is the gift God knew that I needed.
Yeah.
to shift so much in my life because I wasn't learning it for the last 10
Yeah.
years. It was
I
like, I'm
I
gonna
get it.
give you this another kid to try to give you this like reality that like life is this is what life is about.
Yeah.
And so over these last especially 6, almost more, even like 8 or 9 months, um I've been a lot more present with my kids. I've been a
Mhm.
lot more present with, I'm not a perfect wife, and nor is my husband a perfect husband. Like, we are working on our relationship, but like in these last months, like we have, I prefer him being close. I
Mhm.
hate when he has to work. We're currently on a stretch of him not working for various reasons, and he, is looking for a job, but like I don't want him to get one, but we need him
Mhm.
for finances. So it's like one of
Yeah.
those things where I'm like, but I've been enjoying that quality time. Like, I'm like, if we could just get rid of all of our bills, this would be
Mhm.
awesome, because if we could just like live like, I'm at that point where I'm like, let's just live in a tent and people
Mhm.
can look at us and be crazy.
Mhm.
Before I closed my shop, I had like a whole breakdown. I was like, let's just move. Let's sell our house. Let's live in our car. Let's just go. I'm ready to just travel the US with you guys and just and we get so caught up in like what's expected of us. I There's plenty of people who would be super disappointed if we ever moved from where we're at.
Yeah.
Not saying that we will, not saying that we won't, but like, you start creating your life with those people in mind that don't
Mhm.
necessarily have an influence on that direct. Like, if for you, it's like
Mhm.
it's you and your kids. If you want to take them
Mhm.
traveling because your job allows that,
Mhm.
you get to do that.
Mhm.
If Anyway, it's
Yeah.
a big thing, and thank you for bringing in the faith piece, because just as I've witnessed you over the last 10 years, like seeing your shifts and your transformations and changes and just life, like we all go through
Mhm.
these transitions. Um, I think that that is a big key too for me right now. The last few months, I have been getting closer to God. I haven't necessarily been going to church, but I have been listening more and reading my Bible more and
Mhm.
consuming more content that is faith related. And it shocks me when people can't see it sometimes,
Mhm.
because he's so evident in everything around us.
Mhm.
Um, so I how would you, I don't know, what are your thoughts there? What would you like to share about that? The one question I had written was, how do you see faith as a piece of wellness and our well-being? But you can kind of
Yeah.
take that however you want.
I mean, for me, it's everything.
Mhm.
It's everything. And I think I've just gotten. I think what people who've been in my life for a while are witnessing is just me being more certain and more vocal
Mm.
about it, because I've had many of these beliefs for, I mean, virtually my whole life. I mean, I remember being like little and like writing little notes to God, like, like in like a little journal before bed. And,
Awesome.
like I always talk to God, and I always feel like he's led me. And
Mhm.
I think it's really important to not, and somebody said this recently, and not that it's like a very specific piece of intellectual property, but it's not something I made up, but I think it's important that we don't put a box on God and what that relationship can look like, and that we are, willing to listen.
Mhm.
Me starting to talk about my faith was an order from God. That was me being obedient. That was me saying, throwing a little tantrum first and being like, really? Like, why are we doing this? But I haven't made a move in probably almost 2 years, without consulting God first. Um, a story for another day is how I'm sitting in this new house,
Yeah.
and how, I mean, how this book even came to be, like this team, that just everything. It's like I'm a very logical person. I'm a very
Mhm.
business savvy like I can't figure out how my life went from what it was in the middle of February 2020 to in less than 4 years, like restoration times 100. I mean, not only did God restore everything that was taken away, but then some, and like a lot, and I'm not just talking money. I'm talking like my health, my mental health, my emotional health, my spiritual health, my friendships, my relationship with my ex-husband, like all of these things that are just, the things that are actually important, not my checklist, not my productivity levels, not what I'm wearing, not, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And as far as an aspect of like life, like it is like the foundation, and I went back and forth with whether or not to, when I first started writing the book, I was not going to include a single, I didn't want to be controversial. And then God's like, time out. That's not what we're doing here, which is so silly. I mean, like millions and millions of people identify as Christian, and Christian is a very, very large term, so
It is.
I don't want to not acknowledge that, but that was just a lie from the devil, so there is a lot of spirituality sprinkled through the book. There's a lot of faith-based information and tools sprinkled through the book, but again, if I didn't include it, I'd be lying to the reader. Like if I told you that all these tools that I created and did was what changed my life, I'd be telling you like, I don't know, like this much of the truth,
Right.
because it's like, even if I did all these tools perfectly every single day and God wasn't involved, like it wouldn't matter.
Yeah.
It just wouldn't matter. And I don't think people understand what kind of life is available to them. I think that I think a lot of people, I could go on here, so I'll be brief, but I think a lot of people like myself have, they call it their church hurt. They went to a church or were brought up in a religion that was very difficult on them mentally, emotionally, and spiritually.
Mhm.
And I just had a friend come to church with me the other day who lived a life like that. And just before the worship team started like their music, I looked at her and I said, you have to let that go. Like, I'm so proud of you that you came here with me today. And I was familiar with parts of her story, but I was like, that wasn't God. Like, that was people doing things that they shouldn't have been doing. That was pride, that was envy, that was whatever it was, right? Like, who
Mhm.
knows? But we can't take the problems that we have with people out on God,
Yeah.
and what more would the enemy want other than for us to do that? I mean,
Absolutely.
seriously. Like
Yeah.
what more, what would be better for the enemy than a bunch of division and just like slices of Christianity and
Yeah.
whatever, like, so I could go on here, but I just think it's important to, back to what I said about birth, be curious. We all have these innate impulses to, you know, I know that we all feel, we use these expressions like, we feel this tug on our heart, right? Or we
Mhm.
feel these butterflies, or we get these goosebumps, right? Like, and we can believe in some of the most ridiculous things that the news tells us, or we can believe in some things that other religions maybe, or other, spiritual practices tell us. And for me, again, this is another conversation because it's deep, but you met me when I was in the thick of new age practices. And, it's like we can believe those things, but we can't believe in God, like how does that even like make it make sense,
Mhm.
So without getting, like I said, without getting like too, I feel like sometimes in these conversations, people will take only what they want to because we don't have time to fully explain. So I try to be
Right.
mindful, but I would say if you feel God tugging on your heart, like
Mhm.
if you feel like you're longing for some sort of connection, or if you feel resentment towards, a church or a group of people because they did you wrong or they made you feel a certain way, like all of that's normal. It's
Absolutely. Yeah.
all normal,
Mhm.
and you will find your people. You will find your relationship with God if you're, actively seeking him. And And if you're anything like me, he will knock down doors to get to you. You know, he will knock down, I mean, he will rip everything out from underneath your feet. He will take everything out of your view. He will take every distraction away, and he will make you get down on your knees and ask for him to be there, because he will show you, he will
Yeah.
show you what matters. And
Yep.
unfortunately, because I'm so damn stubborn, that's the route that he took with me. But I'm grateful for that.
Mhm.
I'm so grateful for that, because now I have a clearer understanding, and I'm learning every day.
Mhm.
So I mean, faith is not just like, it is like the
Foundation. Mhm.
foundation from which everything else in my life has been built. And um, I intend to bring back in-person village meetings, revised 2.0, 5.0. I don't know what version we're on. And again, I don't know when this will, actually be aired, and, what will be happening with the book, but a lot of the pre-order offers that I'm going to have for people who choose to pre-order the book will be around, some like different trainings and
Yeah.
like opportunities, that kind of meet that, because I feel like the OG village crew is like ready to be meeting again. And these new people who are entering my communities, I feel like we're needing and longing for that. Like you said,
Yeah.
that in-person connection. And I am at a place in my life again to hold space for that, So that's in a nutshell how I feel about faith.
I love it. I love
It's
it.
everything.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I totally get that. Um, we'll do one final question, which is,
Okay.
and I feel like you've kind of answered this, but you can revise it or give something
Okay.
completely brand
Fun.
new. What is one tip you would like to give those listening around supporting their themselves? I mean, I have health and wellness, but that, like we just talked about, it could include faith,
Mhm.
it can include self-improvement, it can include anything.
Okay. So I would say, because we already covered the faith part, and like y'all know how I feel about that, I would say time.
Mm.
Like, learn how to be honest with yourself. Like, if you are unhappy in any way in your life, I'm convinced it's because you are somewhere, somehow not meeting your needs. You're not meeting your needs. And it's either because you forgot what your needs are, you don't know what your needs are, you don't know who you are, you're feeling lost, you're in these in-between phases, life is too busy, you're worried about everything else, whatever. But it all comes back to your time. So like the biggest like life hack I could give somebody is to seriously, honestly monitor your time. So like you shared, I think before we started
Yeah,
recording,
before we started
about
recording,
you,
yeah.
yeah, about you kind of like jotting down the way that you're spending your time. And I would encourage people to do this like on a normal couple of days, or over a normal, because usually a weekend looks different than a weekday. Or maybe you have like gym days and other days are not gym days. Or for me, like I have my kids certain days and other days I don't. Like those days look
Right.
differently. But just getting really clear about how you're spending your time. And again, there's like a major tool in the book on this, but it's taking inventory of your time, because once you see it in black and white, and once it's going to make you sick,
Mhm.
because you're going to be like, well, I don't even know what happened to 12 to 4,
Mhm.
or you look at your time and you're like, man, I'm running from here to here and here to here and here to here and here to here. And then you wonder why you're having headaches at 3 o'clock. It's because you didn't eat
Yes.
all day,
Mhm.
or you're wondering why you're staying up all night. And it's because you had your last coffee at 6 o'clock because you run to a baseball game, or, whatever. So like, you can't argue with it if you do it. So
Yep.
and it starts there, because so many people will take a jam-packed day or a totally aimless day and try to overhaul their life without taking inventory first.
Mhm.
And you're just shooting yourself in the foot. That's why so many people fail, and they
Yeah.
don't stick with things. So I would say if you're going to do like one thing, or if you want one takeaway from this, well, there's going to be like one and then one A, it's like, orient yourself in a way where you're facing God, and then get honest with yourself about the way you're spending your time. And when you do that, then I think, you start to become aware of what your situation really is, not what you think it is. And you can take steps that you actually need to take, not steps that you think you need to take.
Absolutely. I love that so much. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you.
Where can people find you? And we will put these in the show notes.
Yeah, best place is ladybeck.com. That's going to have everything you need right now. If you want to join my mailing list, connect with me on Instagram, Facebook, like all
Perfect.
the places.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much. This was fun and it goes so fast.
I know. I'm like, holy cow, it's been 50 minutes. All
I
right.
know. I know. Thank you guys so much for listening, though. And thanks, Emily. I appreciate
Yes.
it.
Thank you. Thank you guys so much for listening to this episode, and we will see you again next week. Have a fantastic week.